Algeria. Algeria's best finish was the round of 16 at the 2014 World Cup. Argentina, one of the few countries that have won the World Cup, and one of the fewer countries that have won it multiple times. 1978, 1986, and 2022. Australia. The Socceroos reached the round of 16 in 2006 and 2022. Austria. 1954 marks their best finish where they reached the semifinals and finished third. Belgium. Belgium's best result was 2018, reaching the semifinals and finishing third. Bosnia and Herzegovina. These guys reached the World Cup group stage in 2014 when they were surprisingly ranked 13th in the world. Brazil. Brazil are the most successful national team with 5 World Cup wins: 1958, 1962, 1970, 1994, and 2002. Bulgaria. Bulgaria's best finish was in 1994, reaching the semifinals and finishing in 4th place. Cameroon. The African side's best finish was reaching the quarterfinals in 1990. Chile. Chile actually hosted the 1962 World Cup and reached the semifinals, finishing in 3rd place. China. You'd think a country with a population as big as theirs, you could form a solid squad of footballers. Only one World Cup appearance ever, and they couldn't make it past the group stage. Colombia's best result was during the 2014 World Cup, where they reached the quarterfinals. Costa Rica. Costa Rica actually reached the quarterfinals during the 2014 World Cup. Croatia's best finish was their heartbreaking defeat in 2018, finishing as runner-ups. Cuba have actually only qualified for one World Cup ever, which was in 1938. And guess what? They reached the quarterfinals. Czech Republic. The Czech Republic have never made it out of the group stage. However, back when they were Czechoslovakia, they actually finished as runner-ups in 1934 and 1962. Denmark. Best result for Denmark was in 1998, where they reached the quarterfinals. Ecuador. 2006 marked their best finish, reaching the round of 16. Egypt. Egypt's best result was in 1934, where they made it to the round of 16. England. The English won the World Cup in 1966, and they've been incorrectly yelling, "It's coming home," every year. France. France has won the World Cup twice, 1998 and 2018. Fun fact, every time you win the World Cup, you get to add a star to your national team crest. So for example, coming into the 2018 tournament, France looked like this. And now they look like this. Germany. The Germans are one of the most successful national teams with wins in 1954, 1974, and 1990 as West Germany, and then another win in 2014 to bring the total to 4. Fun fact, there was no World Cup tournament in 1942 or 1946. I bet you can't guess why. Ghana's best finish was in 2010 when they reached the World Cup quarterfinals. Greece made it to the round of 16 at the 2014 World Cup. Hungary actually used to be such a powerhouse during ancient times. They finished as runner-ups at the 1938 and the 1954 World Cup tournaments. India. This is an interesting one. In 1950, every other nation in their qualifying group actually withdrew, meaning that India qualified for the World Cup by default. However, India ended up withdrawing too for unknown reasons, so they have actually never participated. Indonesia actually reached the round of 16 at the 1938 World Cup. Ireland reached the quarterfinals in 1990. Israel. The Israelis have only qualified for one World Cup appearance in 1970, which they failed to make it out of the group stage. Italy. The Italians won the World Cup in 1934, 1938, 1982, and then most recently in 2006. They've also missed out on the last 2 World Cups. I know that has nothing to do with the topic of the video, but I just thought it was funny. Japan. The Samurai Blue are fairly new to the World Cup scene with their first appearance in 1998. Since then, they've reached the round of 16 4 times: 2002, 2010, 2018, and 2022. Jordan have qualified for the very first World Cup in 2026, so we'll see how they do. Mexico. The Mexican national team has 2 quarterfinal finishes in 1970 and 1986. Morocco is actually the first African team to reach the World Cup semifinals, which they did in 2022. They finished that tournament in 4th place. The Netherlands. The Dutch have to be one of the most heartbreaking teams. Their best finish was 3 times being the runner-up in 1974, 1978, and 2010. I think we can all agree that Cruyff really deserved one. Nigeria have never made it past the round of 16, which they reached in 1994, 1998, and 2014. North Korea. This one surprised me. North Korea reached the quarterfinals at the 1966 World Cup. Northern Ireland have actually qualified for 3 World Cups, with their best finish being in 1958, reaching the quarterfinals. Norway. Norway's best finish was making it to the round of 16 in 1938 and 1998. Is Holland going to change that? Paraguay. The 2010 quarterfinals is the farthest Paraguay has reached at the World Cup. Peru. Peru have reached the quarterfinals on two separate occasions, in 1970 and 1978. Poland. To my surprise, they actually reached the semifinals twice, finishing third at the 1974 and the 1982 World Cups. Portugal. Led the way by Eusebio, Portugal's best finish was the semifinals in 1966 when they were knocked out by eventual champions England and finished third. Qatar. Qatar have only ever qualified for one World Cup, which they hosted in 2022, and to be honest, did they really even qualify? Or did they just get an automatic spot for hosting? Either way, as you could have guessed, they didn't make it past the group stage. Romania. Romania actually reached the quarterfinals in 1994. Russia's best finish was in 2018 when they reached the quarterfinals on their home soil. But if you count the Soviet Union, then they actually reached the semifinals, finishing in fourth in 1966. Saudi Arabia. The Saudis' best result was in 1994, reaching the round of 16. Scotland. 8 World Cup appearances, but they've never made it past the group stage. Senegal. Senegal actually made their very first World Cup appearance in 2002, and surprisingly made the quarterfinals that same year. Serbia. This one is a little tricky because it depends on what you count. If you count Yugoslavia, then their best result was reaching the semifinals on 2 occasions in 1930 and 1962, where they finished fourth in both. But if you're only counting just Serbia, then they have never passed the group stage. Slovakia once made it to the round of 16, but as mentioned earlier, Czechoslovakia are 2-time runner-ups. They can go fight the Czech Republic for who gets to claim these ones. South Africa. Iconic World Cup tournament, iconic team. Unfortunately, have never made it past the group stage. South Korea. The Koreans once reached the semifinals, finishing fourth in 2002. Spain. Best result was when they won the World Cup in 2010 with that insane squad of theirs. Sweden. Sweden was actually a powerhouse back in the day, with their best finish being runner-ups in the 1958 World Cup. Switzerland. The best result for the Swiss was reaching the quarterfinals on 3 separate occasions in 1934, 1938, and 1954. Turkey. Fun fact, Turkey actually qualified for the 1950 World Cup. However, they never participated because they had no money. They made their first appearance in 1954 and then actually went on to reach the semifinals and finish third in 2002. Ukraine has actually only ever made one World Cup appearance in 2006, which they reached the quarterfinals. United States. Surprisingly, the U.S.'s best result was reaching the semifinals and finishing third. This was in 1930, however. Don't worry though, I think we can all agree that USA is winning the 2026 World Cup on home soil. Uruguay. Uruguay actually won the very first World Cup in 1930 and then went on to win a second one in 1950. Uzbekistan, they actually qualified for the 2026 World Cup tournament, which is their first one ever, so I guess we'll find out soon. Wales. The best finish for Wales was reaching the quarterfinals in 1958. There are lots of other nations that have qualified for a World Cup appearance, however failed to make it past the group stage. Instead of going through each one, here is the list of the rest of them. As for nations that have never qualified for the World Cup, here they are. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe and stay tuned in for the next one. Peace.